Audiobook Academy. Book Summary. Basic Economics by Thomas Sowell. Thomas Sowell simplifies economics and basic economics. He addresses the economic fundamentals behind prices, enterprises, labor, investment, governments, trade, etc. Governance and economics affect a society's prosperity. Chapter 1, Economics. In Chapter 1 of Basic Economics, Thomas Sowell introduces economics, scarcity, and productivity. Economy, a system for producing and distributing ordinary goods and services. Economics, the study of finite resources with multiple uses. Scarcity, everyone wants more than what exists, hence economics is needed. Productivity, the pace at which inputs become outputs, measures efforts' effectiveness. Economics helps us maximize our possibilities, especially when allocating resources. Markets and prices. In Part 1 of Basic Economics, Thomas Sowell analyzes the relationship between pricing and markets. Chapter 2, Pricing. Thomas Sowell analyzes prices and resource allocation in Basic Economics. Chapter 2. Market economy, an economic system in which output and prices are decided by unrestrained competition between individuals and enterprises, not central planners. Transactions, buying or selling between consumers, manufacturers, retailers, landlords, or workers on mutually agreeable terms. Prices, and sum of money that communicates the transaction's parameters to everyone in the economy. Supply, producers supply more at higher prices and less at lower prices, quantity supplied fluctuates directly with price. Demand, customers buy more at reduced prices and less at higher prices, the quantity desired indirectly fluctuates with price. Limited resources cause unmet needs. Price controls. Thomas Sowell examines pricing ceilings and floors and how they cause shortages or surpluses in Basic Economics. Chapter 3. Price controls, government restrictions to keep prices from rising due to supply and demand. Price ceilings, keeping prices lower than they would be, resulting in shortage, when demand exceeds supply, leading to hoarding, illegal markets, and quality decline. Price floors, keeping prices higher than they would be, leading in surplus, when consumers buy less than what is available. Pricing overview. Thomas Sowell discusses how pricing affect producer, consumer, and government decisions in Chapter 4 of Basic Economics. Economics examines the effects of allocating finite resources with multiple uses. Cause and effect, examining incentive logic and the results of such incentives. Systematic causation, complex relationships between buyers, sellers, the environment, government, etc. Complexity and causation, complicated phenomena may have simple or complex causes. Rationality, despite economic problems, actors normally act rationally given their incentives and limits. Incentive, something that encourages or drives behavior. Subsidy, a government subsidy to individuals or corporations to lower prices. Taxes, government-imposed financial obligations for individuals and businesses. Cost, the business expense of manufacturing or offering a product or service. Part 2, Business. Thomas Sowell discusses corporate economics and profits and losses in Basic Economics. Part 2. Chapter 5, Businesses Rise and Fall. Half of new enterprises fail within 4 years, and a third fail within 2. Thomas Sowell covers company formation, growth, and failure in Basic Economics. Chapter 5. Companies must adapt to changing conditions to survive. Social, changes in knowledge and insight for society's material well-being. Economic developments and business financial management. Technology, equipment upgrades. Changes in management methods and personalities. Profits and losses. Chapter 6. Thomas Sowell discusses profit, costs, revenue, specialization, and distribution in Basic Economics. Chapter 6. Profits equals revenue, cost. Profits as incentives. The expectation for profits and the danger of losses encourages a business owner in a capitalist market to produce at the lowest cost and sell what customers are most ready to pay for. Investment profit rates. Profit/investment equals ROI. Production costs. Economics of scale, cost savings from increasing manufacturing. Diseconomies of scale, inflection point where the cost of generating a unit of output no longer drops when the volume of production increases. Costs and capacity. Capacity is normally created to accommodate the maximum production output, therefore costs vary depending on how much is used. Passing on costs and savings, passing on market pressures, tax increases/cuts, or tech breakthroughs to customers. Distribution. Middlemen are more efficient than others at connecting producers and customers. Socialist economies lack incentives to be more efficient, inventive, and cost-effective in production and distribution. 7. Big Business Economics. Thomas Sowell analyzes major corporations in Basic Economics Chapter 7. Corporations, legal entities that limit owners' financial liability to company assets. Corporate governance, executives, management, work for the board of directors, ownership, who have final say. Monopoly, a single business that controls a sector and excludes all other possible competitors. Monopoly prices, monopolists produce less at higher prices than competing industries with identical resources, tech, and cost factors. Cartel, an organized group of manufacturers that controls supply of an item or service to manipulate prices. Chapter 8, Antitrust and Regulation. Thomas Sowell discusses regulation in Basic Economics Chapter 8. Regulatory commissions, a government entity that sets and enforces standards and prices for a certain economic sector, cause inefficiencies and poor pricing. Antitrust laws protect customers from predatory businesses, prohibit monopolies, and ensure competition. Competition, a market environment in which many enterprises compete inside a field that is hard to define and usually eliminates many competitors. Control of the market, the fallacy that a company's market share indicates its control. Predatory pricing, an unproven hypothesis that a corporation risks losses by selling below cost to eliminate competitors. Markets and non-markets. Businesses are so common today, but they weren't always around. In Basic Economics, Thomas Sowell discusses private nonprofits like colleges, hospitals, and museums. The government operates monopolies and mandates. It offers passports, post offices, and national parks. Due to cost benefits, several enterprises were displaced by other producers. Scarcity causes unequal resource transfers, especially if industrial advancements raise living standards. 3. Work and pay. Part 3 of Basic Economics covers labor and wages. 10. Productivity and pay. Thomas Sowell examines wages and worker productivity in Basic Economics Chapter 10. Wages, payment for labor or a mechanism to allocate scarce labor, have multiple purposes because there is always more work than people have time or skills. Productivity, an employee's earnings contribution, usually stated as output per period. Earnings. Income distribution based on experience, talents, education, etc. Differences in skills. As the economy gets increasingly sophisticated and complicated, higher skilled workers are in demand and rewarded. Capital complements work in the production process, but it also competes with labor for employment. Minimum wages. In Basic Economics, Thomas Sowell discusses minimum wage laws. Minimum wage laws, government legislation making it illegal to pay less than a stated amount for labor, often creates a price floor for workers and results in unemployment, the percentage of unemployed people looking for work. Minimum wage regulations usually increase labor surplus. Informal minimum wages, customs, informal government pressure, popular opinion, and labor unions have a comparable effect. Minimum wage rules affect young, inexperienced, and unskilled workers. Chapter 12, Special Labor Market Issues. Thomas Sowell discusses underemployment, worker rights, collective bargaining, and more in Basic Economics Chapter 13. Underemployment, when a worker's job doesn't use their abilities, is part-time, or leaves them idle. Working conditions, government and union regulation of safety, child labor, and maximum work hours. Collective bargaining. Industry-employer organizations. Labor unions negotiate with employers. Exploitation, regulation to protect consumers or employees can raise prices or increase unemployment. 4. Time and risk. Thomas Sowell examines time and risk in Part 4 of Basic Economics. Investment. Sowell discusses investment in Basic Economics Chapter 13. Investment, spending money or human capital in hopes of a return. ROI equals profit/investment. Investment allocation, interest rates determine borrowing costs and allocation. Low interest rates, borrowing increases because investing is more profitable. High interest rates discourage borrowing and increase saving. Speculation, investing scarce resources or expertise with the goal of big gain but with the risk of major loss. Inventory, company-owned products for sale, replacement for knowledge. Low inventory drives customers away. Excess inventory raises expenses compared to competitors. Present value, money is worth more today than tomorrow. 14. Stocks, bonds, and insurance. Thomas Sowell examines bond, stock, and insurance investments in Basic Economics Chapter 14. Bond, a legal obligation to pay fixed amounts on a fixed date, whether the business makes money or loses money. Stock, a company's stake with no certainty that it will generate a profit or pay dividends instead of reinvesting. Risk, the potential that an investment's return will differ from expectations. Diversification, investing in multiple asset classes to lessen risk exposure. In exchange for a premium, insurance guarantees reimbursement for defined loss, damage, illness, or death. Moral hazard, the danger that a contract party acts in bad faith or takes exceptional risks since they are unlikely to incur consequences. Adverse selection, when high-risk people buy insurance. Chapter 15, Time Risk Issues. Thomas Sowell addresses time, risk, and uncertainty issues in Basic Economics Chapter 15. Risk is calculable, uncertainty is not. Uncertainty can deter investors and consumers from spending, hurting the economy. Time is money, it means that whoever can wait can impose costs on others, possibly disastrous costs. Economic adjustments, decisions have long-term consequences, and markets adjust at various rates for different decisions. National economy. Thomas Sowell examines the macroeconomy in Part 5 of Basic Economics. 16. National output. Thomas Sowell discusses national production and output in Basic Economics Chapter 16. Fallacy of composition, assuming that what pertains to one component of the economy applies to the rest, ignoring actor interactions. Consumer spending drives economic output. GDP is a country's total output of goods and services. Consumer Price Index, CPI, monitors inflation by tracking the average price change consumers pay for a group of products and services. GDP per capita, economic growth indicator of national prosperity. Money and banking. Thomas Sowell discusses banks and money in Basic Economics Chapter 17. Money, an economy's medium of exchange. Inflation, prices rise as money's purchasing power decreases. Deflation, prices fall as money's purchasing power rises. Banks lend and store money. Banking system, financial intermediaries that allow numerous people to invest or spend strangers' money. Fractional reserve banking, banks must maintain a portion of reserve money to cover deposits, utilizing the rest for lending. Chapter 18, Governance. Thomas Sowell analyzes governments in Basic Economics Chapter 1. Governments regulate the economy, enforce contracts, and authorize market transactions. Property rights, legally possess and use resources. Social order, while a market economy performs better in a country where honesty is more pervasive, free markets tend to punish dishonesty. Externality, an external cost or benefit created by a producer that is not monetarily incurred or received by that entity. Governments strive to balance these effects via laws. Incentives and constraints, examine incentives and constraints before having the government fix a problem and increase its role. Unless the government grows. Government finance. Thomas Sowell analyzes government financing in Basic Economics Chapter 19. National debt, government budget shortfalls across time. Government revenues. Taxes, mandatory payments collected by governments, which sets tax rates, but public reaction determines total revenue. Government bonds, an asset sold by the government to borrow money to be repaid from tax revenues. Charges, governments sell mail, passports, railroads, etc. Government spending, which rises during recessions and falls during booms. Government budgets forecast revenue and spending. Special economic issues. Thomas Sowell discusses national economic difficulties including policy scope and government failure in Basic Economics Chapter 20. Scope of government, some decisions are political, while others are market or government decisions. It is vital not just to decide which particular end would be preferable but also which approach gives the best prospect of actually obtaining that outcome when choosing between them. A nation's central bank uses monetary policy to regulate money supply and promote economic growth. Market failure and government failure. Many consider government interventions as necessary and advantageous due to market imperfections. However, market flaws must be evaluated against government interventions' imperfections. International economy. Thomas Sowell discusses global economics in Basic Economics Part 6. Trade. Thomas Sowell shows in Basic Economics Chapter 21 that two or more nations profit in international trade for three reasons. Absolute advantage, the ability of one country to manufacture goods and services cheaper or better than its trading partners. Comparative advantage, the ability of one country to produce certain commodities or services at lower opportunity costs than its trading partners. Economics of scale, the massive output that allows nations to sell at prices that can compete with the prices of equivalent products on the world market. Trade barriers. Protections are falsely claimed to preserve high salaries, save jobs, protect infant industries, support national defense, and prevent dumping of inferior products. Tariffs, which increase import prices. Quotas on specific imported goods. 22. International wealth transfers. Sowell discusses foreign wealth transfers in Basic Economics Chapter 22. International investments. Wealthier nations invest in other wealthier nations for stability, efficiency, and profitability. Remittances and immigration have driven national wealth transfers, while imperialism and foreign aid have had little impact. International monetary mechanism, regulations and system for money exchange between countries, since most transfers are currency, not commodities and services. 23. International wealth disparities. Thomas Sowell examines numerous causes of global wealth disparity in Basic Economics Chapter 23. Geographic factors, soil for farms, water for transport and trade, mountains for weather and isolation, and animals for food and production all affect a country's economy. Cultures, cultural differences affect national wealth disparities, the promotion of law and order, attitudes toward work and economic development, idea sharing between varied backgrounds, and human capital use. Population density does not seem to affect prosperity. Instead, productivity, which depends on habits, abilities, and experience, improves it. Migration, humans have traveled, spreading technology and changing cultures. Imperialism, conquests transferred wealth, culture, and people, but there is no evidence that existing economic differences between nations in income and wealth can be explained by a history of imperial exploitation. Special economic matters. Thomas Sowell discusses several economic issues in Basic Economics Part 7. Market myths, Chapter 24. Thomas Sowell analyzes market misconceptions in Basic Economics Chapter 24. Prices myth. Prices have been equated to tolls charged for private profit or to barriers which, again for private profit, prevent the potential stream of commodities from the masses who need them. Brand names, a technique of economizing on scarce information, and of compelling companies to compete in quality as well as price. Non-profits are under very little pressure to fulfill their institutional goals to the utmost degree practicable with the resources at their disposal. Non-economic values. Scarcity and resource alternatives require trade-offs in economics. Sowell discusses market morality in Basic Economics Chapter 25. Markets are erroneously accused as impeding values, promoting greed, and being immoral. Saving lives is one reason for economic measures. If life is not infinitely valuable, a gadget, legislation, or policy is not worth whatever it costs if it saves only one life. Certainly not if saving one life means harming others. Chapter 26, Economics History. Thomas Sowell summarizes economic history in Basic Economics Chapter 26. Classical Economics. Mercantilists argued for policies permitting a nation to export more than it imports, creating a net inflow of gold to pay for the difference. Adam Smith, the father of modern economics, believed competition, supply and demand, and self-interest could self-regulate open markets. David Ricardo, wage, profit, labor, comparative advantage, and rent theories. Say's law, spending from past production and sales drives demand for ongoing production. Econometrics. The marginalist revolution, a thesis that people make judgments on the margin, divided classical and modern economics. Equilibrium theory, shows how supply and demand balance an economy and set prices. Keynesian economics, a theory that manages aggregate demand with government actions to avoid recessions. Post-Keynesian economics, found the market more rational and more responsive than the Keynesians had assumed, and the government less so. Economics. Is economics science or ideology? Do economic theories evolve with events? Last thoughts. Thomas Sowell writes in Basic Economics Chapter 27 that new economic fallacies are being produced or misinterpreted as old ones are being debunked. Economic fallacies rely on 1. Thinking of the economy as zero-sum transactions. 2. Ignoring market competition or 3. Ignoring policy's long-term effects. Proceeding. Thomas Sowell simplifies economics and basic economics.